Something else that makes this conversation difficult is the stigma that can come up. And Kat here is going to share a little bit about the stigma around sexual health.
I think a lot of the stigma comes from a misunderstanding about STIs and what they really are. They're a little bit blown out of proportion in some ways. For example, herpes is something that most people on the planet have. Whether it is active or not is another story, but a lot of the other STIs are really just like getting a cold. You take some antibiotics and you're good to go. Not many of them are lifelong challenges or life-threatening even. So it's important to just calm the nervous system around it and not go into a big fear story, and just support yourself to feel safe if it happens to be that you get an STI or there's a risk of one. I mean, I have been somebody that has had an STI and I've passed it on to someone else, and they had a bigger story around it than I did, and it took a lot for me to not go into shame and guilt myself when faced with that reflection from somebody else. So
Yeah, so something that you just spoke to that I think is also important to consider is if we have a safe sex conversation with someone and the person that we're with discloses that they have an STI, how do we hold that with a level of ease and grace? I would step back and just say, managing our discomfort. There it is again. If my partner discloses that they have an STI, which is a conversation that I've been part of multiple times, then I want to be compassionate and caring in nature rather than going into judgment and getting kind of stuck in the fear stories and social conditionings around it. My preference is for sure to create an atmosphere for that whatever they're going through, it's safe for them to talk about it without the risk of being judged or criticized for it. And for me, that all starts with managing my own discomfort. If I'm in my ease and grace and regulation, nervous system regulation, that really helps the situation go really well. And rather than it kind of erupting into a big conflict, there's room to collaborate and say, okay, now what? Rather than kind of slamming the door shut due to an amplified reaction.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to engage sexually with that person, but it's just having compassion for their experience and for the vulnerability of sharing that, because it is extremely vulnerable to share based on the stigma that has been created in our society.
Now that we've established that we want to approach the conversation with a degree of ease and nervous system regulation, how do we start that conversation? I'd really love to talk about that. I think how we bring it up, depending on the context that it shows up in, is actually quite important. One of the biggest fears that can come up for people is, oh, well, things are starting to heat up and things are getting sexy and I don't want to ruin the energy. And I think that's a legitimate concern because there's a value for intimacy and connection that's present that wants to be sustained. And I think we can have both. We can approach the conversation that actually encourages deeper intimacy, deeper closeness, deeper connection. So just to play a hypothetical scenario here, let's say this conversation comes up where you're with a partner, a new prospective partner, and there's sexual energy flowing, and it looks like your situation's moving like you're about to engage with each other sexually. For sure, we want to have this conversation prior to engaging. As a person who deeply values intimacy, connection, and vulnerability, I love it how you said it in our Boundaries podcast, where vulnerability plus empathy equals intimacy. For me, that for sure rings true in a safe sex conversation. If I'm engaging with a brand new partner and it's time for us to have that conversation before we really engage, how I like to position it is as I love intimacy and vulnerability, and I really feel closer to my partner when that's established. And a safe sex conversation is a highly intimate, possibly highly vulnerable conversation to have. And so I would approach it, I mean, the way I would language it might be different from person to person or situation to situation, but I would say, hey, I would really love to feel more connected and establish a deeper level of intimacy with you right now. And one of the ways I like to do that is to have a safe sex conversation so that we can know that we're going to engage together from a place of clarity, trust, and safety. Yeah, and just declare it. The delineation between that approach and a possible other approach is, am I approaching the conversation from a place of fear and anxiety, or am I authentically making a move to bring us closer together? Yeah. If I'm making a move to bring us closer together, we can speak from a place of desire rather than obligation. To me, that's the delineation, is desire versus obligation. If I'm approaching the conversation from a place of obligation, it's like, well, I guess we better discuss this. That's like, there's like almost like a begrudging quality to like, I have to do this. But if it's coming from a place of authentic desire, like I really want to feel more connected with you. I really want my nervous system to relax a little bit more so I can be at ease with engaging with you, and having an atmosphere of safety, especially on the sexual health front, really supports me in that. Yeah. And so speaking to the desire, that's kind of my go-to.
Yeah, that's a really good point and a really beautiful way of introducing the safe sex conversation. It can support to create more intimacy and closeness. Again, after having this like somewhat serious conversation, it can support to invite more play and more eroticism into the conversation.
Yeah, love it. So good. The next thing we're going to get into is, once we've started the conversation and we're in it, what's the best, most optimal way to navigate it? For me, just some of the key talking points are, when was the last time that we were tested? What was the results? And have we been with any partners since then? If we have been with partners since we've been tested, we can even ask more probing questions, such as, did you have safe sex conversations with those partners? Are you fluid bonded? For me, fluid bonded can mean one of many different scenarios. Of course, kissing is a form of being fluid bonded, but it's not sexual fluid bonded. So there's a little bit of a different, it carries a little bit of a different weight to it for me. When I'm speaking about being fluid bonded in a safe sex conversation, I'm mostly referencing the genital fluids, because of course we can contract STIs from mouth to genital contact as well as genital to genital contact. It is extraordinarily difficult to contract an STI just from straight mouth to mouth contact. Yeah. So with all of that being said, Kat and I are going to role model a safe sex conversation right here, right now, so you can see what a live modeling in real time looks like.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll take the lead.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hey, Kat, I'm super into what's happening right now. I'm really feeling connected with you, and my body feels alive with sexual energy, and it feels really awesome. And I'm noticing I'm having a desire for just a deeper level of intimacy and safety around what's happening right now. And I'd love to have a safe sex conversation with you and explore where we're both at with that. Is that something you're open to engaging with?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Yeah. So here's my story. I was recently tested. I took an STI test 2 weeks ago, and I was tested for everything except for herpes. The reason why I wasn't tested for herpes is because I had a cold sore when I was 18 years old, and that being herpes simplex 1, I will test positive for herpes because I'll have herpes antibodies in my system. This is something that I was informed by a sexual health doctor, and because I had a cold sore, she informed me not to get the herpes test because it would be redundant, because she said I would for sure test positive. So that being said, I haven't had a cold sore on my mouth since I was 18 years old, and I'm 36 now, so that was 18 years ago. And I've never had anything that's resembled a genital herpes outbreak. What I did get tested for is gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, HIV, hepatitis B, and C. I got tested in both genitals as well as my mouth, because of course we can carry STI in our mouth, especially gonorrhea and chlamydia. And so I got tested for everything, and my results all came back negative. I haven't been with any partners since I've been tested. How about you?
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, totally.
I was last tested for STIs in February. I was tested for gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, and HIV. all of my results came back negative. They generally don't test for herpes unless you have had any symptoms or an outbreak. And I have been with 2 partners since then. One of them has been without a condom. We were in a monogamous relationship for a time, and so we were fluid bonded. The other partner I had a safe sex conversation with, and I decided to use a condom.
Beautiful. Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So your first partner, you said you were in a monogamous relationship and you had unprotected sex. Mm-hmm. Did you have a safe sex conversation with them?
No, I did not have a safe sex conversation with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for your honesty and sharing what's going on for you. One thing I will say is that I deeply value my sexual health and I feel really protective about it. And due to the fact that you engaged with a partner where you didn't have a safe sex conversation, that to me creates like a little bit of an unknown situation. And so what I would love to do is to engage with you from a place where we're not necessarily being fluid bonded together. So to me, that means kissing, touch with our hands, as well as sex with a condom. And what I would love, if you're open and willing to it, is if you're willing to get tested again and you come back negative, then I would be significantly more open to the conversation of fluid bonding.
Beautiful. That sounds great to me.
Yeah, does that sound good? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just going to punctuate a few highlights that are important to bring up during the conversation. The first one is when was the last time that we were tested? What did we get tested for? What are the results? Who are the other partners that we've been with? And how airtight is our sexual health conversations and sexual safety with those people? And having a degree of honesty around all of these parts will just empower our new partner to make a really deeply informed decision about how they choose to engage with us. And this is a great time for setting boundaries as well. If there's something that you need to do to like just slow down the pace of the sexual engagement and be clear about our parameters and boundaries that we want to put around it, that's empowering for everyone to know, what are our rules of engagement and how are we going to play today.
Yeah, I love what you said about that. And, for me, that's because of your response to my experience and my sharing, I actually felt much closer to you, and I felt like there was more safety created between us, and I felt like there were no question marks, and I knew where you stood and you knew where I stood. And so I felt empowered to connect with you in a more intimate way.
Yeah, definitely. When I have these conversations with people, when we really just let go of our shame or guilt stories around the conversation or our sexuality in general, and we can just be authentic and vulnerable with each other in this way, like to me, that's so hot. It's like, even if my partner was to tell me they had an STI, the fact that they're disclosing that almost turns me on. It's like it's that psychological and emotional intimacy that is cultivated when we really get honest and vulnerable in these types of conversations. Yeah, and that's super hot to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It comes back to that equation of like vulnerability plus empathy equals intimacy, and intimacy is sexy.